Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, of course, you can go into Makana and ask those questions. You can ask the questions. You can chat about the questions. You can vote on the questions. If you'd like to get into Makana, of course, you can go to officehours.global/join and sign up there. You'll start to get an email. You'll get links to the Discord and Makana. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, it's fine. You can just go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global and ask your question any time of the day. And then we will feed those questions in over the next few days. So sometimes the same day, probably not today though, because we have so many questions. So make sure you can still ask the questions because they might get voted up anyway if it's a good question. But go ahead and vote your questions up. You really want to use voting today because we only have 1 hour of Q&A today, and we've got a lot of questions in front of us. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Oliver Breidenbach starts us off from Boyne Software today. For the high school studio, about 20 by 30 feet, with 3 NDI cameras on tripods with wheels and only one Ethernet cable per camera, what are the most practical cable ramps or covers for this use case in terms of type, length, and brand?
Good, Courtney.
I would just use, there is stuff called tunnel tape. Uline sells it. That has about 4-inch wide gaffer tape, but there's no adhesive in the middle 4 inches. So it's only got adhesive along the edges here. So you can run cables through the middle, and then it doesn't have any sticky residue and leave any of that on your cables. So it's, you can, it's 30 yards long, so you can make it however length that you need, cut it to length for whatever walkways or passageways you need to cross with your Ethernet cables. Otherwise, I would try and use that tape to cover it wherever it crosses foot traffic, and then get it to the nearest wall wherever you can, and then just run it down the edges of the wall where nobody's going to trip over it. And with Ethernet cable, that's the easiest route to go.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to suggest you don't go down, you go up. And the reason I'm saying that is when I had a fixed studio, and I'm assuming that's what you're working in here, a fixed room rather than something you have to tear down after every shoot. If you're in that situation, you have to tear it down after every shoot. Tapes and tunnels and ramps and things like that work great. But if not, instead of going low, go high. This was the roof of my studio. And I can't tell you how much easier it was working in a studio where the cables go from every position you have a source up to the ceiling. There's nothing on the floor to stop a wheeled camera to have it bounce over there. It is cleaner. People don't get tripped on things. So whenever possible in any setup I do, if I have a lot of cables and particularly 3 cameras or something like that, getting things off the floor and up to the ceiling made a huge difference in my career. It just was easier to work with and safer all the way around. So if you can, I'd suggest taking a look at doing that.
Good guy.
Yeah, for high schools in particular, what we would do is we would sell them reels of cable that was just thicker and more robust so that people would see it, and it's easier for the kids to wind up at the end of the day. And if you step on this one, it doesn't matter as much. If you did want to use something to alert people to where it's at, there's some tape that's yellow like this that's going to at least tell people where it's at, but it just depends on the run, if it's a football field, basketball. But yeah, the best thing to do is just get a more ruggedized cable, and then use common sense if you can avoid the walkways where people are going to trample over it. But I found that just using a thicker cable and not worrying about it as much, because at the end of the day, you don't want to have like a fiber cable that's really thin and then have people have to worry about it, because then that's the worst, especially in a hotel where they're rolling those carts across like water and stuff where you're going to damage the cable.
Yeah, another thing to think about is raised floors. So we've used these in a lot of studios. So usually now what I will say first is the first thing I think about when I think about a 20 by 30 space is a grid. So think about putting a grid up. This is typically we would do that with speed rail. And that would be, you don't need to put anything in the walls or hang anything from the ceiling. You just put corners up. And here's the main thing is that you'll put little flats on the corners here. We'll just say here. And then you put the speed rail between these, and you may need to put ones. You will need to put ones in the center because you can't span 30 feet. So you would, in the middle, you'll end up spanning that one. You can span the 20 feet. That they make 20-foot speed rail, and it'll work fine. And then what you'll do is you would end up starting to build a grid here. The most expensive part is the pieces. the Hollinger pieces are the most expensive part of this because the speed rail itself is pretty cheap. And you can use cheaper components if you want to. But anyway, you build that grid. Now, the thing you need to do to make sure that the grid doesn't move, because these are on poles. So you put poles up in the corners and on here. And then what you do is they have little ones that you can attach to those, and they have pads. And you push the pads against the wall. So you push them in all directions, and it will tighten that grid without having to hang anything from the ceiling. It'll tighten the grid it'll be as if it was part of the room at that point. So really think about that, because it's really hard to do after you put the rest of the set in. so think about that as a first step there. It really makes life easier for a long time. Then you end up in kind of where Bill was talking about hanging the cables down. You may find that that's good. The other thing you can do is have patches so that you can go a certain distance with those, because you have it on wheels. I'm assuming you may want to move these around, but you can have patches in the ceiling where you just simply plug into the one that makes the most sense for you. And that's one of the nice things about NDI, is that you don't have to figure out the cabling, routing, and everything else. You just get it in there, and it should give you that route. So think about that. The raised floors that I was talking about are not the big server raised floors. There's rubber raised floors that, and I was trying to find them before the show, but I couldn't quite find the right ones. But they're about 3 or 4 centimeters high, and you can run all your cables underneath them. It's life-changing. And we like when you have them there, everything looks really clean, and then you have little things, you have outlets and other things that you can put in them, and it just keeps all your runs, and still not permanent. You can still pull them out and push new ones in, but it keeps all that from being hanging out all over the place, and especially if you're trying to move things around with wheels, it really makes life great. Next question.
Mark Steele in Orlando, Florida is up next. Mark says, Musk and Trump had an online meeting last night utilizing X's Spaces platform that was delayed for 40 minutes due to technical difficulties. Thoughts? And he's got a Guardian article link there if you want to look.
Jesse?
Weird things happen when a million people try to do the same thing at the same time. And that's what happened last night on X. And, Mr. Musk is often at the tip of many spears, sometimes simultaneously, and you sometimes have wipeouts when you're at the tip of a spear, and when you're at the tip of many, you have several public wipeouts now and then. I think the biggest mistake on this broadcast was that 24 hours prior, Mr. Musk tweeted that they were going to do some scaling tests, which anyone on this panel will tell you that you want to do more than 24 hours of scaling tests before you host the president on any platform at all. That was the big mistake, because it undermines the DDoS attack narrative to know that they were just seeing how it would grow over the next 24 hours.
Yeah, the problem is it's hard to do big events without doing big events. So, you can do scaling tests, and what you do is you actually build bots that are all trying to hammer the stream. But the problem you get into when you do that is that the bots don't act like humans. And so this is the biggest problem with very large live streams, is that humans interact differently than bots. And it's very hard to get the bots to do exactly what the humans do. So an example is, when something doesn't work, a bot will report that it doesn't work. When something doesn't work with a human, they'll hit the button over and over and over again. They'll just keep on tapping it. They'll refresh their page. They'll do a bunch of random things trying to get it to work because they really want to get in. Because what happens with live streams is it's about to start and they all want to be there, and they all come in at the same time, and then they panic when it's not there. And they're like, it's not working. It's not working. And that panic is just, it's death, to a system. And so you really have to, the only way to do this is to slowly scale up. And there's not really, the companies that do this, the YouTubes, the Akamais, the so on and so forth, that do it at scale, have been doing it for a long time, and they understand how to scale. It's not something you can scale up for 1 million viewers. It's just not like you hire someone to do that. And the problem that Twitter or X has is that their high-profile streams used to be managed by MLBAM. So the Major League Baseballs, and that is the platform for doing a private stream. So if you're doing it is, they have MLBAM has, I think, 8 backup streams. Like it is an incredible, a wonder of technology. When Disney bought it, they slowly pulled it in to manage all of Disney Plus and just told all of their partners a couple of years ago, you can't use this anymore. They were not going to do any outside work. And so so now Twitter had to go back to what they had with Periscope. And I don't know if they've made it any better, but 5 years ago it was held together with baling wire, And so, so I think that is the problem is they don't really have the technology in-house right now to do that. They could hire people to do it, but it would still take some time. I don't think that this was a DDoS attack. I think that Jesse is correct that this was just a load problem, that there was a lot of people that went to see it, and it was probably way more than they've had in the past. And it just the system wasn't built for it. And I say that from experience that I'm surprised that any of these streams over 100,000 have worked on Twitter because of my experience streaming to Twitter. And I've streamed some pretty big shows, to Twitter or X. But it's not been the only stream. It's been like, oh, we'll do YouTube and Twitter and Akamai and, we'll see what we get there. So having all your eggs in that basket, and I think they did end up spilling over to YouTube and everything else, because I think YouTube had 65,000 people watching. YouTube probably didn't even notice they were streaming. Its streaming technology is so big. So it was like, oh yeah, someone told me that there was something going on over there. So anyway, I think that's it was just and it will get better. And the only way to get it better is to do it over and over again. So, the answer is not to go, oh, we should never do that again for X. The answer is, oh, we have somebody that can test our platform, and they should probably encourage more testing of the platform from all the political entities or anybody, artists and so on and so forth. But the only way you get good at doing streams for 1 million people is to do streams for 1 million people. And it's a hard thing to do. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you gave the most definitive answer there, but I don't have X, so I wasn't watching. But wasn't this a question for you, Alex? Wasn't this an audio only stream? And is it it's not really a bandwidth problem, it's a connection problem. It's an IP handling problem.
Well,
for
it's
the
still
servers.
being streamed
right?
out.
Or
even if it's audio, it's still being streamed out. And the issue is that it's still got to be relayed. And what happens is that the audio is getting, and what they're trying to do oftentimes with this is a very low latency. If it's just the audio, then it's a very low latency connection, and that is very hard to do at scale. Like it's and I would argue, and it's typically Twitter Spaces has been very low latency audio. It hasn't had 20 seconds or 30 seconds of delay, which is what I would do with a stream of. If I thought 1 million people would be there, I'd want to have a lot of delay, a lot of buffer. And I don't know if they had that or not, but I think that they're fundamentally, I think that to get back to it, they just don't have the infrastructure to do this. And the only way they're going to get it is to do these things, hit the wall, back up, figure out how to fix it, and do it again. And I think, YouTube went through that 12 years ago. They haven't had, we had definitely things that we felt like were scaling issues, early on. But YouTube even in the early days even had Akamai as a backup. So there was ways to not have it be a problem until the scale was to a point where they could handle it. So that's why they had very little, because they were adulting when it comes to this stuff. So, so I think that, Twitter's I'm sure that there'll be a bunch of meetings about it today, and they'll figure it out. Next question.
Oliver Breidenbach from Mimo Live headquarters says, I plan to use Zoom on an iPad mounted on the NDI camera using a camera cage to provide some comms and program out return feed via Zoom call. Good or bad idea?
Good guy.
Yeah, it depends on the show. I mean, you could probably get away with it, but the latency involved with Zoom, as a camera operator, it would drive me crazy to have a delay. When I move the camera, I want that return, especially if I'm in a box. So there's a super source, like, for example, at this Bloomberg show that we were doing, in room, there was an interpreter. And so you could see in this top right and left that those screens, the interpreter is almost over the top of the head of the host on the right. And I could hear it over comms like, hey, watch your framing. And we're watching for the stream. We're not watching for the in-house. And so there was this kind of dynamic of almost a fight over comms as to who's the show going out for. It's like, hey, we got thousands of people online versus you only got, a couple hundred in the house and only a few that can't hear and that need that interpretation. So having the box, the return program and being able to select, usually on these professional cameras, you have a little switch that you could switch between program and your live feed. So it depends on the camera operator and if they can handle it, if you're using super sources or boxes like that to where they need to watch their framing, or if the director over comms will just say, hey, camera 2, watch your framing, more nose room, more headspace, things like that. I just think it's a bad idea. And as far as comms, I'd use more the Unity or Space Comms or one of the other solutions, again, just because of latency. I don't think that I'd rely on Zoom unless I had to.
Good, Bill.
I'd always listen to Guy about things like this because I think he really knows from experience what's going on. For me, the one thing, though, was that I have been shocked at both my original iPads and my iPad Pros about how stable and solid they've been as just regular computing devices. Almost every time I've thrown a task at my iPad Pro that I would normally run on my laptop, it has run really smoothly and just like it would on my desktop, with the exception of the touch stuff, obviously. And so to me, I'm thinking more and more of tablet computing as just computing like the rest of it, and it doesn't seem to be limited, particularly now that those M-series chips are in there and it's got probably most of the processing power of the desktop machines. It's been a really good platform for me. So that's just on the individual device being capable, not on the things that Guy was addressing, which I believe him about all day long.
Yeah, I think that the camera itself, the operator would have to be able to look at the operator in that case would have to be able to look at. I think our question jumped ahead. I'm going to cancel that. So in that one, I think that the camera itself needs to be zero latency, which it'll have its own monitor. Hopefully, if it's got its own monitor, then you see it there. So then the program return would be just the program, and that's really allowing the operator to know that they're live, or see what's going on around them. So it could work, but I would feel like you'd have to run a cable there anyway. And if you're going to have to run a cable there anyway, then I would just give it regular baseband, like with a monitor, on it. I don't know if I would use Zoom for it. I don't know if you're trying to use the cellular or Wi-Fi if you're trying to use the iPad and you want to use Wi-Fi, there are wireless connections that you could use for that return. I wouldn't do it for the camera on the way out, but you could have some kind of wireless return if you needed to have a monitor there if you're just trying to avoid a cable. But it seems like if you have an NDI camera, you can have a switch where the camera is and have an NDI monitor that was there and take the feed from the camera and put it back on the monitor. So I'm not sure exactly what part of the program, unless you're trying to send it's a Zoom program that you're trying to make sure that they can see. So yeah, I think I need more detail about exactly what you're trying to produce there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Any new recommendations on the best portable 5x7 backdrop stand and accent light for travel for someone who is flying often and will hopefully fit in luggage and wants a consistent background?
Good, Courtney.
I don't know if there's somebody who makes one that includes the accent light, but you can use an Elgato clip-on light, battery-powered. And you use something like this. You can get these at a Home Depot for about $45. It's designed to travel. It's a stand with a stretchable banner that you can have printed to whatever background that you want to have behind you. Don't use stuff and repeat. So that you could have maybe a nice mottled gray or something that's unobtrusive, or bricks if you want to go that route. And it's only about $45. Get it at Home Depot, and it's 96 by 96 inches. I don't know if that's going to fit your 5x7 requirements, but it's certainly tall enough and wide enough to do a single backdrop for a single and get it far enough away from you to have a decent backlight that you could clip across that crossbar on the back to point at the back of your head.
That was really good. I was like, yeah, that's a really nice stand. There's a lot of stands that you can get on there's a lot of those kinds of stands. That one looks like one of the more compact stands I've seen, but you can get what is essentially two light stands with a crossbar, and then you can screw it in, and then you can pull it to it. It's just going to be a little bit bigger, I think, than what Courtney was showing. Go ahead, Bill.
So if you want to go even more minimalist than that, there are clips like this one. I've owned a few of these over the course of the years. It is a single background holder clip, and it works particularly well with those pop-up backgrounds that work like car, sun shield, window blockers. And we've talked about how to fold those up. That would make a small, and a 5x7 in that kind of form factor is pretty common. A lot of the big background companies sell all sorts of backgrounds for them. This, a single stand, I'm partial to my old Bogan stacker stands because they're very flat when they fold up as opposed to kind of circular in form, which means that they don't take up as much suitcase room. So a stacker stand, a clip like this, a pop-up background, and if you're inside hotel rooms and you don't have to deal with wind and stuff like that, it'd be fine for you. I would not use it outdoors ever because it just becomes a sail and it'll all blow away.
I'm still looking at Courtney's stand from Home Depot. It's really nice. Here's what's interesting about it is that what is unique, as someone who's done this a lot all over the world, is that what's unique about this one is that it's got this bar across the bottom, which oftentimes the ones that you buy on Amazon won't have, and it's adjustable inside of this piece here. So it's a relatively quick adjust. Because what I was thinking is, of course, if you wanted, I've had to do green screens in hotels all over the world. And being able to have this kind of setup, the only thing you probably have is sometimes you'd have a hard time getting to stand straight up with these, without the tripod style. They have the tripod style. The ones that I was thinking about are, let's see if I can get back to it. Hello. This is the other version of that, right? This is what there's many of these on Amazon that are there. And the problem with this one from pulling it tight is there's nothing across the bottom. So you end up with nothing that's pulling at the bottom to keep it really taut. You can see both of these have those crossbars at the bottom. This one looks like it's a little bit more hefty than the $45 one. But still, the problem you'll have with these feet is getting them to want to stay flat. But you can see that it's a relatively small thing. It's going to be a little longer. And so the question is can you fit it into your bag? But if you're looking for something to fit into the bag, I was thinking about it when I looked at this question earlier this morning, and I was thinking about the fact that it'd be a really interesting use case to have something that would fit into into your carry-on, that was designed to be short enough to do that.
That's why I recommended that stacker stand. Folded up, it's only about 37 inches, so diagonally across a standard roller bag, often it fits in there.
Right. I'm always in carry-on mode, so it's always got to be within, it's got to be shorter than 22 inches. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and let me warn you, if you carry anything, the bag for this thing, is kind of like long and canvas. And that attracts a lot of scrutiny if it's as long as a long gun. Taking it on the plane.
Long and canvases, yeah, exactly.
You will be X-rayed everywhere.
Everywhere you go.
Everyone will have, when I used to do a lot of work in front of the White House, when a dignitary would come into the West Wing, there's this one awning that kind of covers it. So all you see is the car go in, but there'd always be two guys with really long canvas bags that would walk over to the room, or to the building across the street. And then the car would go in and two guys would walk back. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Andre Dole in Berlin. I want to control an Analoge Way Switcher on one VLAN and a Playback machine on a different VLAN with one companion. Can I set up two NICs on the companion machine and control both machines in different VLANs? If not, what could be a workaround?
Good guy.
Yeah, I was just testing this to make sure. So I have two separate networks here. One's a 10 dot and another one's a 192. It's for my internet stuff, and the one's for NDI. And I'm able to open up Companion with just the 1.7, local address, and then talk to each network because there is two NIC cards on that machine. So yeah, the answer is yes, it'll work.
Next question.
Next one comes from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm stress testing the Zoom integration with vMix. I was able to receive Zoom audio in vMix, but the video feed from vMix to Zoom cut in and out or was delayed. What could cause this?
I think that Chad was working on this, and we saw this with some of the tests that Chad was doing, and I believe it was a CPU issue. And so what you want to look at is what is the load on your CPU and GPU. I'm not 100% sure, and it took Chad quite a bit of time to get this to work. This seems to be the real problem in vMix with the Zoom integration is small clicks and problems there. But I think that I think what worked was to keep the system very clean and not have it doing anything else. keep the CPU load lower. So I think that, but definitely be careful with both vMix or any software-based switchers to make sure you're always looking at what your load is. I would recommend targeting 40% and putting up to 60% and not going over 60%. If you're going over 60%, you're going to start to see anomalies. Next question.
Nathan Cashin in Oregon City says, I'm finishing my master's in health information technology this month. I want to take advantage of EDU discounts while I still have my student email. I have Final Cut Logic, I think that package, etc. What are some other educational discounts to look for?
Let's see, he's already got Final Cut. There is, the Maxon deal is great. Maxon 1, I think, is $10 a year if you have an education, if you have an ID. So that's a great one because that's normally like, I don't know, $100 a month. So for $10 a year, it's a pretty good deal. I think that Autodesk also has some for their 3D tools, and as does SketchUp, which is a great app to know. So I mostly know the 3D ones because those are really expensive. I don't know how many other educational opportunities there are, but those would be the ones that I'd look at. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada is up next. I'm in the market for XLR cables less than 15 feet long. Is there a recommended or best brand to buy?
Best. He said best. He didn't say cheapest. He didn't say best bang for your buck. He just said best. So I just Chester, when you say that, it just lets our spendy side run free. I will say that if I was going to buy cables pre-made that I wanted to be the best, I'd probably still buy Mogami cables. I have Mogami cables that I bought 15 years ago that have gone through hell and still work perfectly, and so they are, they're star quad with, Neutrik connectors. That's what you're looking for, by the way. Star quad cable, Neutrik connectors, well made. So those are the, but Mogami is probably the best ones that you can buy off the shelf, in my opinion. But there's a lot of other ones that are more cost effective. And if you're not putting them under stress, probably don't need that level. Go ahead, Bill.
And if you're just looking, you can get those, by the way, and other cables. The place I used to go all the time was the Marker Tech catalog. They have a cable shop there. They will build things like that in custom lengths, but they also have all the shorter lengths, and you can specify whether you want the Neutrik connectors or their base connectors. I've never had one of theirs fail earlier than I expected it to, which is like 15 to 20 years. So they're a reliable source of that kind of thing. If you just want something quick and easy, you can order off the shelf.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I always thought Canary was a trademark name of Canary owned Star Quad as a trademark, but maybe I'm wrong. Mogami may have a version of that, which is, 2 cables for each leg. So 2 hot, 2 neutral, and a spiral wound shroud. I would have occasionally, if you want custom cables, you want them different colors, for example. You can get them in fixed length or made to order at Location Sound Corp in Los Angeles, or there's another company that they call No Shorts that I have them build my SDI cables because they build the highest quality cable. You can specify the type of cable you want, the color you want, the connectors you want. But so specify the Star Quad, Canary, or Mogami if they make it, and Neutrik connectors. I think you'd be best off.
I think that Mogami's term for their quad is the Neglix, but it's the same. I'm pretty sure it's the same as the Star Quad.
Same idea. Yeah, Star Quad is just a registered trademark of Canary. Right.
So, but that 4-up is Mogami calls it the Neglix. We thought that name up. Anyway, let's make a name up that no one can remember. All right, next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Up next, a follow-up to the Zoom vMix integration. In Zoom, I don't have the option to mute audio in the vMix participant. Does it just automatically receive program audio, or do I need to create a bus out in vMix for Zoom? Thanks.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine right now, and all the audio just comes across for each participant. I mean, that's the benefit of this, is that each participant that's talking, you can control their levels with the audio mixer here individually. If you want to play with this test to round out your system, I'll put a link in the chat, but basically these bots are running 24/7, and as long as you have, when you set up your Zoom integration with vMix, as long as you say recording, not live streaming, it'll automatically grant you what they call recording privileges. So make sure in your meeting, if you're not host or co-host, that you have recording privileges, and that'll give you the ability to mute or unmute. But as far as what I'm looking at here with the Zoom integration, you have control via these little green lights to turn audio on or off for each participant, or you can use these levels here on the right to adjust each person individually. And that's the benefit of having Zoom integrated natively, is that you can isolate each person, mute each person at your whim. So unlike regular Zoom, where you would get, by screen scraping, you would get everybody's audio muxed together. If a dog starts barking, you can't isolate that one person. So in vMix, you can just grab that mixer and turn them down. Or I like to use the little Behringer X Touch, and then there's a profile in there where you can grab a physical fader. So that's the way to go if you're going to be doing a lot of this.
Quick reminder that you can keep on putting questions in. They may get voted up. There's a lot of questions there already, so make sure to vote on the questions. Voting is very important, but you can keep on throwing them in. And any time of the day, you can go to askofficehours.global. You might want to ask 3 or 4 questions at a time. Sometimes we have some folks that get excited and start asking us 10 or 15 questions. It's probably more than we can handle. It's kind of hard to process. So think about 3 or 4 and see how those go first before putting in more. So something to think about there. Next question.
John Bontrager in Cincinnati, Ohio. Dead & Company wrapped up their Sphere concerts. They posted a full crew list on the screen. Last slide in his slideshow that's linked here at the bottom. Has anyone witnessed this at a concert? And he's got that link.
Go ahead, Bill.
I took a look at the link and I followed through. So, where are you in the world between a movie and a concert? We are totally conditioned to seeing these big credit rolls at the end of movies. We are not so conditioned to seeing them in concerts. And it's interesting to me because the Sphere is kind of a hybrid of both of those things. It is a concert, but it's also a movie, essentially. So they've gone the movie route and put this big credit list at the end. I found it fascinating. I looked at the credit list and there's a couple of things I didn't understand. First of all, John Mayer, of all the odd artists to me, is the producer of this. He was also the creative director. He's working with 2 original members of the Grateful Dead and a band around them. And, I think for people who love that music, they probably were very satisfied at what's going on there. But it was an interesting credit roll at the end. Particularly interesting to me, there was 1 traditional publicist and I think 3 social media publicists listed at the end. Just shows you how they expect people to consume content now and what's important in terms of promotion.
All I can say is that I don't think I think Jesse was talking about this before the show. Until I saw that image, I was like, the Sphere is going to be okay. I saw that image, I was like, I need to go. I need to go see that. I don't know if I needed to see it for a Dead show, but I was like, okay, that's something I need to see. But I can only imagine that if people were nominally medicated the way that they normally would at a Dead show, that would be a great image, So but I don't know if that's really.
I want a T-shirt that says nominally medicated.
Yeah, but but that's not really my speed. But I think that I saw it and I was like, that would be really interesting to look up at all of that while it's happening. It feels very vast. So I definitely have to get there. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, this looks like a great step up from the original Dead show, which had an overhead projector with a pan of water on it and colored oils that they were sprinkling.
Exactly.
That was during the 60s, and that guy got credit all the time. So, yeah.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. I tried the Blackmagic app on my Android, and the aperture kept auto-adjusting. Scrap that video. Is there a way to lock it?
I was having trouble with my Asteroid. Okay, go ahead, Jesse.
That's right. I was still in the Grateful Dead concert. Sorry.
I'm not going to be able to demo on an Android, nor will I be able to demo the f-stop. But there are locking features on the Blackmagic app. So we're going to go over to the shutter, and you can see that you could adjust the shutter here. But there's a little lock icon, and when you tap that, it will not change the shutter. You can do the same thing for white balance. So white balance is now locked, and it'll stay fixed as long as I'm shooting. I imagine there would be some similar functionality for the f-stop as you poke through the menus, and if not, that would definitely be like a submit a ticket request feature type thing.
Next question.
Jesse, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of the various field mixers of professional grade, when we're recording live, which one can last the longest on battery in bad weather conditions and time constraints?
Go ahead, Courtney.
The sound devices has a problem with theirs because they consume a lot of current. They'll run through batteries very quickly. I found that the Zoom F6s, the F series from Zoom, just sips battery compared to the sound devices. And they have 3 sources of battery. That's like the F6 has internal pin lights, which you can use in a loop or rechargeable pin lights in. And then it has connectors on the back for the N-type Sony rechargeable cells, which it will run on the 950s. It will run all day long, pretty much on. And then it's got a USB-C plug where it will power off external USB-C source. So you could have a battery pack on that as well. And it will seamlessly switch between the two. So whichever one is delivering the most current, it will select. And you can have all 3 sources of power put up. So you have kind of a backup in any case. Usually I always keep the rechargeable batteries fully recharged in mine. So in case I'm using the clip-on batteries on the back, so when one goes dead, you can pull it off and stick a new one on, and it keeps running continuously because it switches over to the internal pin lights when the back batteries go dead and you go to replace them.
Good, Bill.
And you say bad weather and you're in Las Vegas, which means that you're probably talking about rain and things like that. That shouldn't be an issue. But if you are traveling and going, the one thing that does really kill battery performance is cold. So if you find yourself in snowy conditions and you want your batteries to last, everybody I know who shoots in those kind of conditions have all sorts of wraps and even use like hikers' hand warmers inside a wrap of some kind around the battery to keep it at a nominal temperature, because cold kills batteries, period.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, my experience is with the mix pre's tend to burn through the batteries that are available to them very fast. I find that the 6 series, 8 series devices with 970 batteries can last a long time, and a lot of them have 2 batteries, or at least the Scorpio has 2 batteries, and no one said anything about price. So anyway, so the Scorpio has 2 batteries. One thing that I didn't know existed until we were looking for this is I didn't know that Small Rig made batteries for that were the F970 form factor. I thought that was pretty interesting, and you can just charge them with a USB-C. And my wallet might have started smoking when I saw that. The idea that one of my biggest complaints about the N970 batteries is the charging process of trying to find a charger and the weird charger and everything else. The idea that I could buy a 970s with USB-C, that's cool. And it tells you how much is on the back. So if I was going to go out, I would probably use an 8 series or a Scorpio out there with dual batteries. With a couple extra ones, and I'd probably be able to last for quite some time. And they are very durable. Like I've done a lot of things with them. I take pretty good care of the Scorpio, but my 788s, which were the most classic, I can't believe I don't have one still with me, but I had a couple 788s and a couple 744s, and they just they went through hell and just kept on recording. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Apple's Mac Mini with M4 chip will be its smallest computer ever, says Bloomberg. Is this the beelinkization of the Mac?
Courtney?
Yeah, I think they were feeling a lot of pressure because of all the mini PCs. They won't be this small, but like Alex says, it'll probably, or Gurman says, they'll probably be the size of the Apple TV box because, hey, they got a lot of those boxes in inventory and they can just use them and relabel. But I think they were feeling the heat of that and the need to get something small that can hang on the back of a large screen TV to use for kiosk work. And a lot of people use Mac Minis for doing that kind of stuff. So it's a better application for that. So I think they are going to have a smaller version. Whether it's going to be adaptable to add memory, if it's going to be adjustable in memory size, if you could add memory and add storage to it, that'd be a great plus, but they probably won't. They'll charge you $200 for that extra 8 gig.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I think this is the Appleification of Apple devices. We've seen the laptops, the iPads, the iPhones, the iMacs, all entered into an arms race with themselves to try to make it the thinnest or smallest possible version of that piece of hardware. The only one that has escaped that arms race is the Mac Mini, and it's finally, it seems like it's finally coming into that let's make it smaller arms race that Apple has with itself.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think it's the iPadification. I still am sitting here looking at my iPad Pro and realizing that it's less than a third of an inch thick, and it's a full computer monitor. It's everything that used to be sitting on my desk in a gigantic box and more and faster, and realize that Surface Mount and these chips have gotten so small and so powerful that we're really, nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to computing power in small devices. And I'm also looking at my Apple Watch going, there's a lot of power even on my wrist now. I can't see this ever stopping. I think it's just going to get smaller, lighter, faster, continuously. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I still think that there's a high probability they're going to replace the Apple TV with, I think they've just stopped with the Apple TV and they're just going to replace it with a Mac Mini. And I think it's going to be very close to the same price, if not the same price. I think they figured out how to put that M4 chip. My guess is the conversation was like, what happens when we put the M4 chip into the because the Apple TV is using similar chips to everything else that's there. It doesn't need as much power as a lot of the other things. So there are theories about where those chips come from. For the Apple TV, it might be the ones that don't work on the iPads. I think that the thought was, hey, if we can get the cost down to $299 or whatever, and just give everybody a full compute device on there, and they can put it into Apple TV mode or take it out of Apple TV mode and put it into computer mode. It's a pretty nifty thing for the next upgrade because the Apple TV is old enough right now that people are ready to upgrade. Oftentimes, Apple users are ready to upgrade, and so you might see a big bump of them upgrading to this little mini that they now can turn their whole house into a and especially when you start thinking about FaceTime and stuff like that, it all becomes much better to do it with a Mac Mini. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to see them do, and there were a number of small PCs that had this feature, is build in a small battery that could fit in the footprint that would run it for about an hour or so, which will give you good backup battery, so that if you're running off shore power and it goes down, I would use this all the time on set. I would use the ones with batteries and PCs. I use little netbooks because they have batteries in them. They'd be hooked up to external screens, but you could unplug them, move them to another room, plug them back in, and you're up and running. You don't have to reboot the computer, and you don't have to worry about somebody kicking out an extension cord because it has basically a built-in UPS. So I'd love to see them build in a nice lithium ferrite battery to run it for about an hour or more.
If they make it that small, one thing I think will be interesting to see, one of the ways to make it smaller is to get rid of the power supply. And so if they move to a USB-C power for it, which they should have done for the current minis, in my opinion, that would definitely reduce a lot of things. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm really curious as to the form factor for rack mounting these out, because Mac Stadium a few years ago in the keynote for the Apple Developers Conference, they showed inside of Mac Stadium, and there was 18,000 Mac Minis racked out. And that was years ago. That was like 4 years ago, and I'm sure it's doubled by now. So when you think about the power consumption, I know people used to joke that if you opened up a Mac Mini, you'd see an iPhone inside of there, because it was just, the chips are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the compute of these M1, M2, M3, M4s are just getting so wicked fast and small and derived from the phone. So I'm excited for my own, what I'd call my personal cloud, because of these power's becoming just a huge issue here, because we do get storms, and I'm about ready to put in a really expensive generator. So if I can get a bunch of Mac Minis that don't consume nearly as much power, I don't have to get as big of a generator. So I'm thinking like data centers, what's the future of compute for Apple, and how can they stick these things inside of a data center so there's less heating and cooling, there's less power consumption, and then there's just more packed into a data center because they're so small and able to just a 19-inch rack and fill 30 of these things instead of 4.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that the form factor, if it really gets to be that small, I mean, the B-Links and the Melees are great. I think that an M4 chip in a very small package will be considerably faster. Like that, it'll have a lot more horsepower. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Next question.
Mariella says, Yamira in Webelow, the Olympic ceremonies were amazing. Billie Eilish sounded so great. How did they keep the sound of her voice so clean and perfect with the mic so far away or off to the side? What mic head did they use to get such a smooth sound?
Go ahead, Bill.
I think most people understand. I'm not sure that was her singing live in that case. I'm thinking there was a track there. And the reason I say that, having been now a lot on beaches in California, you very seldom are out there without significant wind. And the kind of miking that she uses, she has a breathy, beautiful, lovely voice, but it is not powerful. Compared to like the Chili Peppers or the rappers who are used to eating a mic and barking into it, her voice just would not be the same with the kind of miking that you can do outdoors in the elements. So I wouldn't be surprised if that part of the performance was tracked. It's what you get from her, and they wanted to recreate that. But I can't imagine that a mic in those windy conditions on a seashore with the gradient between the ocean temperature and the sand, there's just always wind out there. I don't think I've ever been in still conditions on a beach in my life.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, Bill nailed it. I watched that performance and I immediately said, "Oh, she's lip syncing to a track," because the breathiness and the very light voice that she sings in, you wouldn't be able to capture that with a dynamic mic. At the distance she's holding it, especially because she's not eating that microphone, the wind would be drowning her out. And plus, they didn't have any speakers or amplification or wedge monitors. They all had in-ear monitors on to hear the track, of course. But there weren't any signs of amplification on that entire stage. So even for the crowd to hear, they may have been listening to the playback through one of the big towers that they had off to the side of the Chili Peppers stage. I think Dr. Dre and Chili Peppers did sing live into those mics, but they're a lot louder. And they were singing to probably pre-recorded tracks. So I think her performance was all pre-recorded.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mike Wilson in Phoenix, Arizona. Is there a good method for mounting two GoPro Hero 12 cameras to achieve proper interaxial distance for effective stereoscopic video?
Jesse?
I mean, for mounting, when we started making our 3D cameras, we were taping disposable cameras onto a 12-inch ruler and doing it that way. You can do better than that by getting a bracket with two mount points on either side, but that just sets you up for the next two major challenges. The first one being synchronizing the cameras, which if they aren't gen-locked, it will be unsettling to the eye and might not have the kick that you want it to. And then the other thing is adjusting I believe the interaxial distance. So as something gets closer, your eyes tend to move. They don't tend to. They actually move inwards. As something goes away, they move outward, and you won't simulate that with an unaffordable rig. That's where things get really expensive. But without the Genlock sync and without the interaxial adjustments, get ready for some disappointment, but for some very, very fun experiments in 3D photo and videography.
Yeah, I did a fair bit of GoPro experiments. As Jesse said, you're not going to get a great experience out of it. There's ways to hack it through the feed, so you can hack that lock so that you can sync the frames pretty closely in it. But it was a rig that GoPro made. I think, let me see if I can find it. I grabbed a couple of these rigs. So what people do is they flip the GoPros and put it there. The reason that they do this is because otherwise you can't get the right interaxial distance, which should be about 65 millimeters. So you're looking for 65 millimeters between the center axis between these two. If it gets wider than that, if it gets less than that, which is what the iPhone has, it shortens the effective range of what feels 3D. Right now, the iPhone sits at about 4 to 8 feet. From my experience, it's not that great after that. It's okay, but you're not going to really see a lot of 3D after you get to about 4 to 8 feet away. As you get to a regular interaxial, you should get to more like 8 to 15 or 10 to 20 feet. And really, the reality is most of us don't see much 3D after that anyway. So at that proper interaxial, it of course increases that range. As the interaxial gets wider than that, and sometimes we do, the widest interaxial I've done is 5 feet because I was shooting something that was I wanted to do hyper 3D, and I was shooting in a landscape in Africa. And so I opened those things up so that the vegetation would look good. I didn't have anything in the foreground, and I wanted the vegetation to look 3D. So you can move those things around, but typically on most of the things, you're going to want about 65 millimeters, and you can't get to that if you put the two cameras right next to each other. Same problem with the Blackmagic micros. And so if you look at this here, this is one version of this. There's a couple, there's a couple people make them here. You can see this one here. And this is, I believe, the little hack that would let you do it. Here's one. This one will not work. So people are whoever put this up was very proud of it. But these ones will not give you the proper, this is too wide of an interaxial. And what that'll do is it'll, and this is the one that GoPro made. Now, this is an underwater one, actually. And the challenge with the, when you put them side by side, when the interaxial is too wide, and I just did this test last week is that your eyes get tired because your eyes are they're converging harder. What Jesse was talking about earlier is when you look at something in front of you, if you look at it like this, you'll see my eyes kind of cross as it goes close. It's converging on something, and it does it all the time. But the bottom of that triangle sits where your interaxial is. And if you open that up, it means that your eyes are working harder to make that work. They will do it, but after 10 or 15 minutes at 75 or 85 millimeters, they will hurt. You'll get tired of watching what you're watching. So you usually want to err on the side of not being too wide. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Guy Cochran. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Pedro Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. For someone that wants to start playing with digital mixing, Flow 8 or X32 Rack?
I'll go, Guy.
I'd say somewhere in the middle, which would be the XR18, which just dropped down in price to $450 or so. The Flow 8 is just too small. It depends on what it is that you want to do. Are you trying to mix for in room where you're going to have like multiple instruments or multiple people talking? If so, I'd also be looking at the Allen and Heath. There's a great video by Live Production Mastery. It's called The Ultimate Corporate Audio Pairing, and it's got the Allen and Heath SQ5, and he shows how to ring out a room and things like that. So I bought an X32 wanting to learn a lot of this stuff, and I wasn't impressed with the pre's. So if you are looking at the X32, also look at the Midas 32, but then if you're getting up to that level, then you may as well just step into this territory, which is what our friend Douglas Carmichael got, and a lot of other people will recommend is the DM3D. So that's a hard item to get because they're limited in stock, but that's also in that realm that I would be looking at. It's that buy once, cry once thing. And there's also a lot of workflow issues as you go into the old school Behringer X32. There's a lot of operators, a lot of videos out there, but it's like 13 years old. So do you want to go the way, if you're using DCAs and things like that, I hear Yamaha's the much better way to go. And if you need to get in things like that, then there's just a lot of questions that, what are you using this mixer for? Is it for people in a room, or is it for recording in a studio, for live production? Sometimes you even need two mixers because there's two different types of sound, one for in the room and one for the live stream. So what are you trying to do with these mixers?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to point out the same thing, and I was going to recommend the DM3. The Yamaha makes a great line of mixers, and the DM series, you can scale yourself up as you get more proficient and learn how to use the DM series. And you can go with the DMS, it's a little cheaper, that doesn't have the Dante on it, or they make a Yamaha digital mixer that has a lot more inputs for about $649. That's a USB interface. The MG16XU, I think this is it. It does not have Dante though. But if your goal is to eventually get to digital mixing that you're going to send over a network, it'd be better to go with the X32 or the DM3D that has Dante built in.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. In the Blackmagic camera app for iOS, which audio format should I select for best quality record? Linear PCM, IEEE Float, or the default AAC?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh boy, this feels like gilding the lily. I would have been happy with MP3 on the, from the mic on the iPhone. Alex, do you have something better?
Typically I would just use the linear PCM. like, because it also means that everything I go to is going to work. The other AAC is definitely not what you want. So you're really talking about the other two. AAC is going to be a highly compressed format. But linear PCM is a standard. It's going to open in everything that you have. So I would probably lean towards that. One of the things we're working on right now with the Blackmagic camera is the various different ways of getting in. And what I will tell you is I'd be very careful of upgrading to the beta of iOS 18. We're having a lot of trouble with audio interfaces related to the iPhone in iOS 18 that are working in 17 and some of the other stuff, and even then in the latest versions of 17 and 18, we're having trouble getting the Mix Pre, Scarletts, et cetera, to talk. The one that does talk to it is this guy. This is so funny. This is the USB Pre 2. I mean, this is actually more expensive than a Mix Pre, and it doesn't record. It doesn't do all the cool things. But what it does do is it has all the controls it has all the controls here, if you can see it here, on the back on dip switches. And that means that it is it just is a very dumb box to the computer. And this is working fine. And this was number 50. Look at that, 58. It's 58th one that we had at one point. Anyway, so that one works great. So, but some of the dumber ones are working fine. The smarter ones that talk back and forth to the computer, we're having trouble with. Next question.
This comes from Chad in Toledo. Could I recreate this setup using a micro studio camera and monitor via Bluetooth from the back seat? If so, how does this mounting system work? And he's got a link there to the MediaFire website for mounting.
I grabbed that somewhere, and I'm just trying to find it. It was an install into a, let's see here. It was an install into a, here we go. What he's talking about is this. So this is the install here that they're talking about. And they're putting Ecamm in there. There's no reason why you couldn't do it there. This is you can see a variety of mounts here. These are small rig. You can see it here. See the logo. So you've got a bunch of small rig mounts. And the Micro has a lot of its own in a similar way. Now, what I typically do is exactly what they did here with the Zcam. Is there's a cage you can get for it, and so you immediately grab the cage. You get a cage for I get a cage for every camera that I use. So you get that cage. Now you've got mount points all over it. And so then what they did is that they obviously just started grabbing onto. They have those little claws that small rig makes and little small rig pieces, and then that you're going to get it by 3 or 4 different directions, and as you tighten that up, it won't move. So then the next thing that you want to do is, of course, you have your audio out. Now you could, I don't know if the new ones will do Bluetooth control, but in a funny world, the last version of this, and I think it's been moved over, it uses the same protocol. You can get a receiver that is, I believe it's an S8 receiver, as S8 or S6. It's the same receiver that you would use for a remote control plane, not a drone, the old-fashioned remote control planes. And you can actually get a controller that looks like remote control planes, and you can talk to it, and you get a little receiver that goes into the pinout on the side of the Micro. Now, this is from the last Micro, not the new 4K Micro. I just haven't used it yet, so I don't know. But and you could actually, we would control them, zoom, focus, aperture with you basically map parts of that controller onto it. The only thing I would be careful of if I was in a plane is I'd make sure that RF isn't affecting the RF in my plane, because that could not be great. So, but I don't know of a Bluetooth way to do it. I'd probably still try to wire it if I could from the back seat rather than do that. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Every time I've had to shoot, even back in the old days from a Bell Jet Ranger, everything you bring into the airframe has to be kind of gone through the FAA to make sure it's certified and can do that. I don't know if Bluetooth, Bluetooth's a near field thing. You're just behind the pilot, I would guess, in that kind of situation. So there may be no problem at all, but that is definitely something I'd want to test just to make sure that my Bluetooth monitoring doesn't get messed up by any of the signals being generated by any of the avionics stuff on the plane. It's a pretty tight, rich signal environment in there, and that would be a circumstance where I would just think test.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if you want to know how the Hollywood pros do it, go to filmtools.com, and they have a whole section just on mounting. So they got these mini Cardellini's and Noga arms, the real ones, not small. I mean, you could do it with the as you see in that picture, you could do it with the cheaper stuff, but you do risk breaking stuff. And the other thing that Film Tools has is, I think that they were doing a 3-point mount, but you'll see a lot in their catalog of, like on this car right here, there's 3 points to mount that item. So you want to have 3 points for the ultimate stability, but there's also these vacuum and suction cup camera mount kits. They're expensive, but this is how the big boys do it. So $266 for one, and you can get up there pretty quick. But I'll put the link in the chat to that Film Tools site.
Last question for the hour.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto has the honor. This YouTube clip from the CMAs really stood out for me. Is it because of the original capture, a higher bit rate in YouTube, or that it's at 60 frames per second? All of the above, maybe?
Great, Courtney.
Sorry, I raised my, maybe all of the above. I looked at it, it was 60, and they seem to be using a lot of wide-angle lenses, which gave you a great depth of field, which makes it look a lot sharper. So that's, I think, one of the things. The 60, of course, eliminates a lot of motion blur for anybody that's moving rapidly around the stage, so it looks a little sharper. And it depends on what kind of hardware you're watching it on. But yeah, if you're watching it on YouTube on a big screen that can handle 1080p 60, it'll look pretty nice.
If you want to see how this is done, what adulting looks like when it comes to doing live shows, watch this. I hadn't seen it until Craig posted this. It is well-engineered cameras running at 60 frames a second, well-designed. I mean, they have a lot of cameras out there too. I mean, they really went all the way, and I saw almost not a single bad shot. And usually you see lots of little like, oh, we did the best we could kind of thing. Very, very well done. It looked like very high. I don't know what kind of cameras they had. I want to actually get them on to talk about it if we can find the production crew. So I'm going to search my friends, find out who did it, and see if we can't get them to come on and talk about it. But one of the things you will notice, and I think that Craig noticed it there, is that it's true 60. So it's none of this, let's say a bad word. None of this dumb 24 to 30 or 20. By the way, if you're streaming to YouTube, it's all 24 to 30. If you're doing 24, it's all 30 or 60. YouTube is 30 or 60. All the other things that you think you're doing to make it look better are not working. So part of what makes this work is that they shot true 59.94 and streamed it to YouTube. And I think that is, you can, I feel like the proof is in the pudding there, that it feels much more live. It feels much better when you're watching a true 60 frame per second concert. It is dramatically better than watching this. We get into these conversations with film crews. They go, I want to make it look like film. And they come out of LA and they're like, oh, we're going to give it the film look. And it looks bad. Like it looks bad on a stream. It looks bad on a stream because no one can see it that way. And so this is definitely an edge that I have about this, because it's just like I have to deal with 24 to 30 or 24 to 60 all the time. And it's such a luxury to look at something that was actually done by an adult. So anyway, I think that 60 frames a second, 24 frames a second is perfect for film because it tells you it's not real. But we're trying to make it real. And so we should be doing it at 60 if we're going to do live. And so it looks great. The color looks good. The engineering looks good. The lenses look good. The edit looks good. It's I'm going to watch more of it. I'm not, it's not usually my normal genre to watch, but I'm going to be watching a bunch of this just to take notes, because it's one of the best live captures I've seen in a decade. So really well done. Thanks, Craig, for posting that. And thanks to everyone. We have so many questions that we left on the floor. I want to remind everybody that you can always bring those questions back in. So if you put them in the QR code, they'll get brought in automatically. If you put them in, they'll be sent back to your notes. But there's a lot of questions there. We'd love to have them tomorrow to fill it out. We answered a lot of questions too, 32 questions. So it was really well done. So thank you so much to the producers. It makes our job so much easier when you ask so many great questions. And so we really appreciate the effort that the producers put into it. We appreciate the panel here, ready to field those questions. The panel was very quiet this morning, and there was like nobody talking. There was no like back and forth. And I came in, I was like, we're all so quiet, and we're like, there's so many questions. Everyone was trying to research and trying to figure it all out. So the panel did a lot of hard work for this one because the producers put so many questions in before the show. So thank you so much to both the panel and the producers, and of course thanks to the incredible team on the back end that does this every single day, 7 days a week. Haven't missed a day. I don't know, since March 25th, 2020. We haven't missed a single day, not a holiday, not a Sunday, not even a day where Zoom didn't turn on. Only one of those. And that was long ago, 4 years ago. So we have not missed a single day. And it is just an incredible testament to the incredible team that is designing the background, running the show, managing the show, doing all the others. And there's tons of other people that are not doing things that aren't even connected to the show. They're working on the Discord, they're working on the emails, they're working on the thumbnails, they're working on all these other things that are not even connected to the show. And we just really appreciate everybody's incredible contribution. Today, if we had walked around and done this in person, the Tlaloc traversal, we would have traveled. I got lost in my thing there. 49,000 miles. That's 79,000 kilometers, and that is 388 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go jump into after hours. That's good.
Good show.
Yeah.
I want my own asteroid now.
No. What do you use? You could use an iPhone, an Android, or an asteroid. I actually think that'd be a great name for a phone. I use the asteroid. It comes in and lays crater.
Samsung asteroid.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't Astro the Jetsons' dog? Am I mixing up?
Yeah.
Rashford.
Rackrow.
All right. See you.
Bye-bye.
Adios.